To me, the greatest lie that the surf industry ever told was that the surf industry was a definition of surf culture. That was the greatest heist ever pulled for a handful of people to make a lot of money, right? So all of the advertising, all of the lens and what it looks like to be the thing was dictated by brands for a very, very, very long time.
Yep.
And now the democratization of the storytelling of what it looks like and means to be a surfer is no longer left just to brands and even the magazines.
Yeah.
I can go online and see people storytelling surfing for what it means to them without having to assimilate to be seen as cool. And that to me is the most exciting thing that's happening for me in surfing today, is seeing new people getting to storytell it in a way that like makes it feel fresh.
That's Selema Masekela. I'm Jamie Brisick, and this is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Surfer's Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Birdwell, FCS, Patagonia, Rainbow, Vans, Vissla, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, TSJ brings you 128 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more or to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. Selema is an American TV host, sports commentator, actor, and singer. His mother is Haitian. His father is the late South African jazz musician Hugh Masekela. Selema grew up in Staten Island, New York, and Carlsbad, California. In the early 1990s, he worked at Transworld Publications, which at the time put out TW Snow and skateboarding, as well as Warp, which covered surf, skate, snow, and music. I first encountered him around this time. He was commentating a pro surf contest at Huntington Beach, and his deep, strong voice leapt out at me. I met him in the flesh shortly thereafter. We've been friends and colleagues ever since. Selema is a legend in sports media. He was the host and executive producer of Vice World of Sports, the host of ESPN's X Games. He co-founded Mami Wata, the African surf lifestyle brand, and he wrote the intro to, and spearheaded AFROSURF, the first book to celebrate surf culture in Africa. Selema and I spoke at his new home in Topanga Canyon with sweeping views over what on the day was thick fog, but what otherwise would have been mountains and sea. He'd just gotten back from New York. We were talking a lot, and we just flowed into the conversation. Did you just fly in from somewhere, or you were just flying from New York?
I was in New York, yeah. I was in New York from my dad's. My dad got inducted into the Lincoln Center Jazz Hall of Fame.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Great.
So myself and my sister, my sister flew out from South Africa.
Okay.
To go and accept it for him, which was incredibly strange. You know, he's been gone for 5 years. You know, my earliest memories with my father was being a kid in the club, in jazz clubs with him. You know?
Right.
That was my field trip on the weekends with him was always spent either in the club or on the road sometimes, or in the studio.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, and that there's the jazz club at Lincoln Center. I was with him there at many shows. He had his 75th birthday party show there as well. So it was strange just to walk through all of these like really, really interesting memories and this big moment to celebrate him, and like looking around for him, you know, like really waiting for him to come around at the corner being like, can you believe it? It's about time. You know, that would have been, his energy would have been like, you motherfuckers are late, but thank you.
Yeah.
And I think the other crazy part was like just looking at on the wall within the hall, and it's all the artists that many of them that he had admired and was looking up to as a child in South Africa, listening on these records before he even knew what they looked like, but knew that that's what he wanted to play like.
Wow.
You know, and he's there with Clifford Brown and Dizzy and Satchmo, Louis Armstrong. You know, it was just, and then there he is, like he's there with them.
Yeah.
So It was really special. It was emotional and a slightly out of body experience.
Yeah. Did you start playing music at a young age?
I did. I started playing when I was in the third grade, second or third grade. One of the benefits of growing up in New York City in the public school system, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, is that music and the arts were massively important.
Yep.
And so you were going on all the great field trips to the Brooklyn Academy of Music and to the theater, and you had to write reports on it. And I remember when they took us all into a room with instruments spread all around, and they go grab what you like. Mm-hmm. And your friends are just scrambling around, and I kind of couldn't make a decision, and I got left with the clarinet. And there were no trumpets left and no saxophones. And so I told my dad I was playing the clarinet, and he was like, well, man, at least we can read the same music, but I really wish you would have picked some brass. But that's how I started. I started playing music young, and my dad and I did play together. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I played pretty much all the way through high school until I got to California. And when I got to California, my high school band at Carlsbad High was like, it was just bad. It was basic. They were playing what we were playing in like 7th or 8th grade. And there were punk bands, but I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
By that point, I had switched to saxophone.
Okay.
And I sang in the choir and stuff growing up. And then once I started surfing, like when I discovered surfing, that just became my music.
Yeah.
Like it literally took over the entirety of my being, and all I could think about was self-expression through this thing.
Yep. I know that's one of the things about surfing is it is so all-consuming. It's so wonderful, and I often think about this. It's to have something that we're that passionate about, but then it's at the expense of a lot of other things.
Yeah, it definitely. Well, the older you get, I think the more it can become at the expense of other things. But for where I was as a teenager, going through like an interesting relationship with my parents, with my stepfather, with the religious system that my family was in, my dad sort of coming in and out of my life, trying to find identity in a place where nobody looked like me.
Yep.
Surfing, as much as like the barriers that I like would sort of have to navigate to get there, once I got there, it was like I was on the holodeck of the Starship Enterprise.
Right.
Like there's only here, and it became a place to like leave everything behind. And I didn't do well in high school. I barely graduated, not because I was dumb, but because I was a social butterfly, and I didn't have a vision for what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I didn't have but what are you going to do? What are you going to go to college? I'm like, I don't want to. Wait, I got to go to a place for 4 more years? And what are we going to do there?
Yeah.
And I can't surf? Like, that was really the thing for me. I can't surf and I can't snowboard. I'm going to figure it out here.
Yeah. And what year did you graduate high school?
89.
Okay. So this was a time when surf, skate, and snow kind of all fused together in a really great way. It was early days for snowboarding.
Yeah.
So and then there was Transworld that did the skate mag, the snow mag, and then they would soon do a few years later, they would do the surf magazine. But they had Warp magazine, which sort of brought the whole,
that was the first, that was the first acknowledgement of us all being in one very weird sludge pool of cool.
Yes. So you worked as an intern at Transworld.
Yeah, I started at Transworld as a receptionist, answering the phones, and then a few months later, they put me on the phones. I was good on the phones. I had worked at Bank of America before that as a teller and in customer service.
Okay.
So I had like the dance of how to like talk to people on the phone very much down.
Yeah.
And I'd worked in service before that at restaurants, etc. So I just knew how to make people feel at ease, and I would try to I endeavored to take whatever that 30 seconds to a minute I had with them to be like, hey, man, yeah, we're all in the same gang here.
Yep.
And the woman, she was in charge of product sales. at the magazine. She was a tyrant, horrible person to work for. Just past my desk was product sales, and I would hear her yelling at these dudes. And one day, one of them just quit. He's like, I can't deal with it anymore. She was like, do you think you can sell some shit? I was like, yeah, I can. All right. She tells my boss that she's taking me off the phones for the afternoon. And she gives me like a ledger, a big binder book of shops, and a list of like what they had ordered before. At this point, I was selling these video magazines, and get on the phone and call them, tell them it's time for them to re-up. And I sold more in a day than the other dude had sold in a month.
Wow.
It ended up being like the real gift for me as far as getting to know the landscape of the industry, because you're talking to every single shop in America.
Yep.
And you're getting to know what the culture is like in Florida, in the Gulf, in Texas, on the East Coast, in the Northwest, in the Midwest. And you realize that, like, holy shit, like we're actually here in Oceanside and in SoCal. This is the hub where everything's happening. And this was our opportunity for exchange.
Yep.
And so it was a really, really fun experience. I ended up working at Transworld for a couple of years. When I left, I was doing production on the video magazine. I had 2 horrible bosses. And then finally it was like, all right, you're out. So it was like the highest high of like, okay, I found my tribe. And then it was like, fuck, I'm out. And that's when I met a guy named Mirko Mangum in the water, another black surfer, which prior to that time I had met maybe one other person who looked like me surfing, which was an event.
Yeah.
And I was at Seaside
Yep.
by myself. And I see this another guy out there. The waves are shit. And then we're looking at each other and we're like, wait, what? And then next thing you know, we both have just boat wakes coming off the back of our board. We paddle up to each other. What's up, dude? Where are you from? Where are you from? And he was a former pro skater who had retired, had really gotten into surfing, and he worked for Chris Miller at Planet Earth Skateboards.
Okay.
And I went to work at Planet Earth after that.
So I think I first met you and became aware of you, it would have been in the mid-90s, and you were announcing a U.S. Open in Huntington Beach. And I remember just this baritone voice that was like, I guess this is all leading to my question for you, which is, at what point did you know that you had this great talent for announcing, commentating? When you did it, you, like, to my mind, I didn't know of you, and then suddenly you arrived fully formed, and it was this person that could sort of commentate on everything and just keep this energy up on the beach. And I remember walking around, watching the surfing in the action, just being really attuned to all the speakers with your voice coming through. So making the leap from kind of not a real prominent space, at least not in the journalistic sense, in the surf media and industry, to basically commentating and knowing all the ins and outs of all the athletes, the inner lives of all the inner mechanics of competitive surfing. How did that go?
That is a great question that no one has ever really asked in such a concise manner. I think how it started was my comfort with strangers in general. So like I said, being on the phones, working in service, also being an entertainer as a kid, playing music, being in plays. No one had to like convince me to play a solo or sing a solo.
Yep.
I'm like, all right, yeah, I got this.
Yep. No stage fright.
No stage fright.
Yeah.
Maybe just before, but not to the point where I'm not going to do the thing.
Right.
And as I was trying, as I mentioned before about surfing, the dilemma that it caused me was that I didn't know how I was going to make a living. So I was working every odd job under the sun before I worked at Transworld. And my parents were concerned. I'm like 20 years old, and they're like, what are you doing? My friends are starting to come home from college with like degrees and jobs. Some of them even have the audacity to be getting married. Maybe they're starting businesses, or their parents have funded them a little bit. And I'm just like, I'm broke.
Yeah.
Like high quality broke, but happy.
Yeah.
Some of them have even stopped surfing, and they're looking at me like I'm some sort of a weirdo. But my passion for it was such that I was like, I don't know how. I just got to figure out a way to stay close to this. And at Transworld, they were doing an event called Board Aid, which was up at Big Bear. It was done with Life Aid music, and it was an intersection of snowboarding, skateboarding, and music to raise awareness about HIV and AIDS. Pretty groundbreaking style of a music action sports festival.
Okay.
That Fran Richards had put together and Louise Balma at Transworld. And I overheard them talking about how they didn't have an MC. Mm-hmm. And I just remember I'd be listening over to these conversations. Well, who are we going to get to announce the bands, et cetera? And I just I could do it. Mm-hmm. They're like, what? I was like, yeah, I could do it. And Louise looked at me and said, okay, you're coming to Big Bear. And that was my first gig.
Wow.
That was my first gig. I remember channeling Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
That Good Morning Big Bear. And people were just like, who is this guy? And I just started rattling off and just talking and flowing and picking people in the audience and talking to them and where'd you come from? And there's Tony Hawk and there's what's going on with the snow. And by the end of it, people were just like, dude,
yeah,
you killed that.
Yeah.
Can you come and, announce our shop demo?
Yep.
Or come and do this beach contest?
Yeah.
A lot of times people would offer me shop credit to come and do something at their store. And it became a side hustle. I never got paid for it.
Uh-huh.
But it became something that I enjoyed. And as far as the knowing part, that also came from being at the ground level and talking to shops every day.
Yeah.
And I voraciously read every magazine.
Yep.
Watched every video.
Yep.
I went to school with Taylor Knox at Carlsbad. So he was a really good friend and someone who really supported me.
Okay.
When I first started surfing, when I was dealing with shit in high school, and even after I graduated, we became friends. He tutored me at lowers and how to learn how to surf the place, and introduced me to Rob and to Kelly. I met Kelly in the water. I think I was we were 19.
Okay.
19 years old.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I started to get to know folks. I used to surf with Doug Silva and Seth Elmer.
Oh yeah, I remember them both. I was close with them both.
Yeah, and so Seth was my mentor in teaching me how to surf waves of consequence, and would drag me out at Swami's on the most fucked up days and be like, all right, here's where we're gonna sit and here's what you're gonna do. And I had these handful of people who saw how crazy my passion was, and kind of towed me in and helped me get up to speed.
Yep.
And get the lay of the land. And then that coupled with my I have a relentless natural curiosity. I think that gave me a weird ability to show up and have fun and be present in the space. And I didn't want to. I remember whenever I would get on the mic, I didn't want to sound like some bro from around the corner.
Yeah.
I wanted the experience to be felt for what it really was.
No, and that's exactly it. And I think that's the thing that when I first heard you, I was attuned to, because prior to that, there was a lot more of a kind of surfer bro drawl to the announcing. It was very insider. It was very inside baseball. If you weren't part of that scene and knew the sort of ins and outs of the athletes or what have you, you were on the outside of it. Whereas yours was, it was more professional. There was more context. It was a smarter way of doing it, as opposed to we're just assuming everyone's on the inside here.
Yeah, I didn't want anyone to assume. And that came from two very weird things.
Uh-huh.
One, my father as a storyteller on stage.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So I grew up with this guy who had to show up, in any town and win these people over, wherever he was playing, in whatever room it was, and find common ground and get them on board and go on a journey.
Yep.
So there was that. Then I had this very interesting secular training in talking to people from my church. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, no kidding.
With my mom and stepdad.
Okay.
And so I had to go every Saturday and knock on doors and like prepare
Yeah.
how to speak to people and convince them not to shut the doors in my face.
Yes.
To tell them about the Bible and their prospect of living forever.
I know it well. My mother was Jehovah's Witness, and then she renounced the
Yeah.
faith and went elsewhere. But she did a lot of that as well.
So when you're in that, like, and that's your life,
Yeah.
and you have to learn how to like prepare 7 to sometimes 15-minute talks where you get up on the stage and you got to speak to the whole congregation
Yeah.
on a passage.
Yep.
You know, and the stakes are high. You're like criticized.
Yeah.
They come up afterwards and they critique your performance and where you could improve so that you could take that out and go door to door.
Yeah.
So this very weird intersection of like, you know, a super worldly, you know, musician and artist world with this very, very conservative, straight ahead. How do you get people to buy into this thing that you're taught to believe you're there to change their lives? And I didn't know at the time when I was wrestling for identity between these two worlds, which was crazy. Like I didn't know how to show up because I hadn't made a choice yet that this was who I wanted to be, but this is how I was being raised. I had no idea, but like by the time I got on the microphone at a surf contest, like all that shit fused.
Yeah. I can see it.
And gave me an ability.
Yep. And the other thing that I think is interesting in announcing is it's improvisational. It's extemporaneous. It's happening in the moment. You can have maybe some sort of a script in the back of your head, but it's really going to unfold in a way that you're not expecting. And it's very similar to a musician on stage. And in particular, like free jazz, there's so much of that, right?
Yeah. And that's the part that's the part that I still love whenever I do get to. Is, you know, I know the storylines, I know who's doing what where, but like in the moment, what happens gives you so much opportunity for story and context in a way that I hope the audience can relate to.
Yeah.
Even if you've never watched a surf contest before.
Yeah. Well, probably being involved in skateboarding and snowboarding and music. I mean, there's a lot of sort of cross-pollination that's happening, whereas a lot of other folks who are announcing surf contests don't have all those references, I guess.
Yeah. And I was lucky that I was announcing skate contests. I think I started doing skate events at the ASR trade show when I met Dave Duncan, who legendary
Great
announcer.
Yes.
And I used to sit and study him at trade shows when I'd be there. And one day I just asked him, I was like, dude, like, you're really good at this. Like, do you think I could get on the mic? And he was like, I don't know. But I just hang out. And one day it was like the midday show was the one he liked to do the least, like the early morning lunch one. Because usually those guys were out getting after it the night before. So one day he came up to me. He's like, hey, that's how you could do the 11 a.m. You know, you got this. I was like, all right. And that was my first time. Skateboarding is far more critical than surfing. You can get away with murder and surf, but skateboarding, they will have your head.
Yeah.
And once I was able to win over those dudes,
Yep.
That's when I was like, okay, I think I got a place to play here. Then snowboarding was really easy. And again, I was really into all of them.
Yeah.
Like I read and watched videos as voraciously across surfing, skating, and snowboarding as I could. It was very much equal for me. And I think that allowed me to sort of talk about what was going on in the other sports or how it might relate to what you're seeing here. Like,
sure.
Especially as surfing started to take real influence at a professional level from snowboarding and skateboarding. From a rotational standpoint.
Definitely, yeah.
It made it far easier to like lend context. I would be sitting with a booth sometimes with someone and then just be like, you know, like what just happened?
Yeah.
Like actually, let me explain to you what just happened.
For sure.
You know?
No, it's so interesting because I think surfing was sort of the first of those three, and then when I was young kid skateboarding, it was very much like surf influenced skateboarding, and then skateboarding sort of branched off into this whole thing, and then it kind of came back and influenced in snowboarding as well with a lot of the air tricks with the rotational
Yeah,
stuff.
it's crazy how it's come full circle.
Yeah,
And even now, what's interesting, I find most interesting now watching the tour, is this like feels like it's a leveling out that's taking place between the high performance and the fundamental purism that's aesthetically pleasing in the building of arcs and turns and combinations. Like it's starting to count. I feel like it's finally starting to level out a bit, and people are realizing that just because you can do an air doesn't mean that it's the best or that it fits.
yeah. No, it's really interesting that I think about that. I kind of come from the school. I remember Sean Thompson was really influential when I was a kid, and I remember there was this thing that he was, and I surfed for his shop at one point, and his sort of fundamental thing was off the bottom, off the top, off the bottom, off the top, and so much good surfing comes from that. And there's the other side, which is sort of riding the upper third of the wave and
Down the
racing
line, down the line, down the
thinking
line.
only about that big kill move at the end, and it can be pyrotechnically exciting, but it's not necessarily like the great flow and utilization. It's not necessarily the lines you want to see. What's most exciting in surfing to you today? And I say that could be on the performance realm, or it could be culturally as well. What gets you most excited?
What gets me most excited today, it's weird, like, I don't know, like Justine DuPont. Like, here's this woman who is completely breaking down the gap between men and women when it comes to waves of complete consequence. She is setting lines and standards that dudes are like, oh yeah, I guess I got to do it that way.
Yeah.
That's exciting to me.
Yes, for sure.
That's really, really exciting.
Yep.
Obviously, Paige Alms and the rest of the whole movement. But Justine, I just see as like this, like she just come from nowhere.
For sure. Why is it happening now, and why didn't it happen 15, 20 years ago?
The industry was a straight up boys club.
Yeah.
I mean, go ask Lisa Anderson how hard it was to be Lisa Anderson.
Yeah.
She had to wear, for a long time before Roxy, she was wearing, trunks down to below her knees, right? Like you had to think about how we talked about women. The compliment of a woman being a good surfer was that she surfed like a guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, she surfs like the dudes.
Yep.
No one would even think to say that anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
You watch a Betty Lou Sakura Johnson or so many of these different women that you just wish you could surf like, and you're like, I just want to surf like that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's been, the industry had to me, the greatest lie that the surf industry ever told was that the surf industry was a definition of surf culture. That was the greatest heist ever pulled for a handful of people to make a lot of money, right? Yeah. So all of the advertising, all of the lens, and what it looks like to be the thing was dictated by brands for a very, very, very long time.
Yep.
And now the democratization of the storytelling of what it looks like and means to be a surfer is no longer left just to brands and even the magazines.
Yeah.
The platforms, Stab, Inertia, they're great, but like I can go online and see people storytelling surfing for what it means to them.
Yeah.
Without having to assimilate to be seen as cool. And that to me is the most exciting thing that's happening for me in surfing today, is seeing new people getting to storytell it in a way that like makes it feel fresh. When I watched when I discovered the women from Textured Waves, which is a group of black and brown women that formed their own crew. They call themselves Textured Waves, and they started storytelling surfing. I got so over the moon psyched watching black women that look like me, not asking for space, not asking for permission, but like taking up space and being like, this is what it is to us. This is what it feels like for us. That to me is is exciting to see across the landscape, like to see it no longer just be, you know, the definition of it be, you got to be like a towhead, blue-eyed guy from, you know, the OC or Southern Australia. Nothing against those dudes.
Yeah. Yep.
But that like the aspirational definition of what it means to be a surfer is no longer fits in a box.
Yes.
That is exciting to me. For a lot of people who are like, I'm sure they're just like depressed because it means crowded lineups, etc. But like, you know what? Like that whole idea of like, if you don't surf, don't start. It's like, it's just such a wildly selfish idea when it comes to an ocean that spans 70% of the planet.
Yeah.
That any of us would be able to say like, hey, listen, you want to get on a boat, you want to get in a kayak, etc. But if you do this thing, you can't do it here.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that there is an understanding that folks need to learn and learn the ways of the force, so to speak, in order for everyone to be able to enjoy it together, be respectful, all the things, build relationship with the ocean. But the idea that certain two groups of people can define what that looks like and who gets to and who doesn't, those days are over.
Yeah.
And I think that's my favorite part of what's happening in surfing right now.
I grew up in Southern California. I'm toe-headed. I was toe-headed and blue-eyed.
Right.
Now my hair's a little darker. But when I grew up, I didn't. It's so interesting because I never realized how privileged I was to live. I lived in the valley, so I didn't live on the beach. But my proximity to the ocean was to where I could go surfing 5 days a week, pretty much. And I didn't realize how lucky that was until I got older and saw it more contextually, you know, in the grander scheme of things. But then the other thing is, growing up in LA, I always felt like I was coming from a more diverse place. And it wasn't until, interestingly, I became a pro surfer and went around the world, which should be diversifying me further. It became more homogenized. And even though the cult, you know, I was going to different countries, but there was a homogenization in the sense of fewer urban we were going to the great waves of the world and not the great cities of the world.
Right.
And then I had friends. I grew up, Nadas Kopas, skateboarder, was a friend of mine, and I watched him. And his odyssey as a skateboarder was going to London, going to Barcelona, going to New York City. And when we sort of would catch up every few years and compare notes, my surfing odyssey was a really narrow one compared to that. But it is interesting. What you just said is so fascinating to me. And I would say the same thing. I asked the same question as I did earlier, which is why did that happen now, and why didn't that happen much earlier?
When I started surfing, there was very much a perception that it was not what we do.
Yeah.
The first kid that I told that I was going to learn to surf, like a week after I got to Carlsbad High, and I'd met some kids who told me that they would teach me, and I was psyched. He looked at me and said, "But you people don't even swim, bro. How are you going to surf?" And when I started going to the beach and I kept showing up, the amount of like the kids who were like the rippers that were unafraid to like use the N-word or make fun of my color that I was there, you know, smile so we can see you when I got darker in the summer. I remember the first time that I like had to leave the water because I was at a place that was like quiet, like a secret spot. They didn't kick my friends out, but the guy literally paddled up and said, "What's your N-word with the hard R ass doing here?"
Wow. And this is Carlsbad?
This is in Central Cal.
Okay.
And so in a pursuit that you go surfing because of the possibility, right? Mm-hmm. You're always like, possibility, possibility, possibility. Navigating it from the idea of like, yes, possibility, but what's it going to take for me to get to possibility? Like, what am I going to have to deal with? Makes it easy for people, if it doesn't feel safe, to not do it. You know, I got a job at a surf shop in Oceanside, and I was psyched. I had been a shop rat. I was so stoked to finally get this job. I wanted to work there so bad. This is before Transworld. And after a few months, they told me it had gotten slow and they had to lay me off. And I was like, oh, fuck. But they're like, well, we'll bring you back on, like, when things pick up. A couple months go by. Who's that girl? Oh, she's new. What? Who's that girl? Huh. And after like 3 or 4 months, I got the hint that like, oh, I'm not coming back on the schedule. I went back and begged for my bank teller job at B of A. And a few months after that, I got a phone call at the bank from a guy who I'd gone to high school with, who was my manager there, a guy named Aaron. And he told my manager he had to talk to me. And she was incensed that I had to close my window and get off the line. I go back to the break room. I pick up the phone, and he says, "Hey, man, I had something on my conscience that I got to tell you." He says, "We didn't let you go because things were slow. The owners actually told us that we had to fire you because your being black didn't fit the image of the surf shop."
Wow.
And he said, "I'm sorry, it's been bothering my conscience. And if you want to do something about it, I just wanted you to know that like I have your back, and I'm sorry that I participated in that."
Jeez.
He had just quit to go and become a fireman. And I remember standing in my break room, like tears in my eyes to hear that.
Yeah.
And walking back out on the line and like just working the rest of the day like a zombie. And then like making the choice to be like, well, they're still not going to take this from me.
Yeah.
I remember when I told my mom what happened, and I was, in the beginning, I was, 19, I'm pissed. I'm like, I'm going to sue. And she said, "You could sue, you could do that, and we'll support you, but that shop is generational in this town. These people have been here for a long time. Who do you think that they're going to believe?" I had to stop and take a deep breath on that one. She said, "What I suggest to you is that you never let them take that from you. They can't take surfing from you." And it lit a fire underneath me, to keep going. So when you experience a bunch of different like small aggressions to like outright aggressions, when you're just trying to pursue a thing that is being sold to you as just a place of joy, it makes it understandable why there's not a lot of people who look different who are doing the thing. And you factor in, the history of coastal cities in America and redlining and who got to live here, who didn't, and all those things. I remember when kids used to come from Poway and get shit, and they were white, but the fact that they were inlanders, like, what are you doing here? God forbid you were black or brown. Like, people's heads would explode. And so I think that it's taken a lot of time. It's taken a long time for the powers, the power structure for the surf industry to no longer be the definition of the surf culture. And for marginalized people to feel the confidence and to hear from enough of their friends that like, yo, this thing over here is the shit. Get that experience, and then also be the same as I was as a kid to be like, fuck it, I don't care who, what. We're doing this, and thus you have the Textured Waves and the Ebony Beach Clubs and the Color the Waters and all of these groups that are like, the industry isn't interested in diversifying the lineup, but it's literally like the people who make up these groups that are deciding, I'm going to do this. I got to bring this magic to my people so that they can have this experience, because for people who like go through the world with constant challenges that you might not be aware of, something like surfing, like just a session and a good wave can like change your life. It's a type of freedom when you don't necessarily feel entirely free in the world. It is the outdoors in general give you this ability to be that if you don't live in those spaces and places, the value of it maybe is even more than the person who gets to do it every day.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think that's what's taken the time and representation is everything. Seeing is believing. And so kids now getting to see that there's a normalcy there. Obviously, like Michael February moment was massive.
Yeah.
I literally, that first heat of his, I shit you not, I sat there on my laptop, bro, and I shed real joy tears. As a fellow South African, my father was a political exile of the country, was a product of apartheid, right? That's how I came to be. And B, that like, you know, here's this first like Indigenous South African with skin like mine on tour.
Yep.
And people finally getting to understand, like, and even, I think the hardest part for me in the storytelling and the way that it was told during that year was that everyone kind of missed the bigger picture. If it wasn't for apartheid, if it wasn't for like a systematic racist system like apartheid that made it so that black and white people couldn't even be in the same beaches together, then the Mikey February, there would have been 10 Mikey Februaries by now.
Yeah.
So what it took for him to arrive in that moment, what had to be overcome generationally, what his father experienced to like even decide that I don't care, I'm going to keep doing this, to make it so that Mikey would have the space and breath where he no longer had to fight that after apartheid ended.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then the fact that like he does so with this expression that is uniquely his and an amalgamation of things you've seen before and things you haven't. That's a huge moment.
Yep.
And in turn makes a bunch of kids that never saw someone who looked like them before be like, oh, we can do that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It's and then, you know, there's so many groups, you know, I go to events. There's this a kid named Brick House and Gage Chrisman. They started something called Ebony Beach Club, and a few Saturdays every summer, a few Sundays during the summer. I think they did like 5 events last summer. He pulls up with his El Camino at Dockweiler, speakers, DJ, black and brown instructors giving surf lessons, and it's like a hangout beach day that turns into a party at the end of the night.
I've heard about this, yeah.
And it's like, it's magic. The first one I went to, I just sat there slack-jawed. Because I'd never seen that many people that looked like me at the beach in Southern California engaging in the experience in the way that they wanted to.
Yeah.
Where they could just be themselves. And I was like, oh, I don't even know what this would have been like if I had this when I was a kid. So it just excites me. Like the future is bright and is colorful. And I feel like there's really not going to be a choice for surfing but to embrace the entirety of what it looks like across the whole globe. I mean, it's why I had such a privilege and an honor to be able to publish AFROSURF last year. You know, to be able to like have a 300 and some odd page book that is just like, hey, this is what surfing looks like as told through the eyes of the African continent.
Yep.
And people just be like, wait, what? That's a thing?
Yeah.
You know, even though surfing has had such massive influence, right, from the country, but to be able to see it like from an Indigenous perspective across the continent and to see the way the culture's interwoven and how it feels and looks different based on what these places are.
Yeah.
In the same way that we revere how that takes place through Polynesia and Southern California and all these other places, and Southeast Asia, to be able to like have that perspective be just a part of the conversation. Just have it have merit and weight in the conversation. I think that's the goal.
Yeah. If I met you for the first time and I said, Selema, what do you do for a living? What would you say?
I would say I'm a storyteller. Storyteller of action sports culture. I think would be my title. You know, I'm not a historian. You know, I'm not the data person, but I'm here for the texture,
Yeah. Yep.
and that is, I like to storytell.
Yeah.
And even when I make music or any other mediums I like to play in, it's from a place of wanting to storytell.
Yep. You've done much more than just surf, skate, snow, right? You did the World Cup in Brazil?
I did the World Cup in South Africa.
In South Africa.
Yeah, and a couple of Olympics.
Yep.
Yeah, but the World Cup in South Africa was special.
Yeah.
That was 2010. It meant a lot. I didn't go to South Africa for the first time until 1991 because my dad was exiled from 1960 to 1990, and then he promptly moved back when Mandela was released. And then I went for the first time in 91, which was insane because I'd, seen footage and read in the magazines about the Gunson 500 and Jeffries and Nahoon Reef and all these places, and now I'm finally there.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to surf there for the first time, which was super powerful. Even though they tried to arrest me in Durban, because the laws had only been off the books for a few months before I got there in the Separation Act, and they hadn't seen any black surfers challenge this new integration. And just a kid being like, "Yeah, I'm out there." And that was a very powerful experience for me. I think that it really galvanized me coming home and really choosing to not take anybody's shit anymore.
Yeah.
Like not allowing people to say things or treat me a certain way just to be accepted. But fast forward 20 years and I'm at ESPN. My run at the X Games was basically like I got a paid television broadcasting journalism education, and I took full advantage of it. I started off as a sideline reporter in snowboarding, and a few years later, by going to all the seminars and showing up for all the things and being like, "Oh yeah, I want to do it at the level of Stuart Scott."
Yep.
That's how I was looking at it. Like, I'm not just announcing a surf contest. Like, I want to be on par with the greats on this network. And they went to college for this shit, so I got to do all I can. And I had a couple people who believed in me, and I had some opportunities at, the NBA. I was a sideline reporter for the Western Conference with Kobe and Shaq in 2004, which was insane.
Yeah.
And up and down the Western Conference playoffs, etc. But I got a call from the then president of ESPN his name was John Skipper, who I'd seen in rooms before but never met. And I get a voicemail back when we used those. I get a voicemail from John Skipper. He says, "Hey, how you doing? Selema Masekela, this is John Skipper, president of ESPN. Listen, we got the World Cup coming up in South Africa, and I know you got some ties there with your family, and just want to talk to you, see how maybe you might want to get involved at all." And I'm like, "What?" Call this dude up, start talking. He's interested in getting my father to do a song, like a theme song for the ABC ESPN broadcast. And so I called Dad. "Yo, World Cup, South Africa, ESPN wants you to do a song. You down?" My dad said, "Tell them that a song is too easy. Tell them that we're going to do," I swear this was right off the top of his head. "Tell them that we're going to do a road trip, you and me, through the country. And we're going to show people, like the people and the pageantry and the culture and the music and the food and the sounds, so that when they watch these games, they know where they are and who these people of South Africa are. You tell them that we're going to do that, and then we can talk about a song."
That's so great.
Called John Skipper. I was like, "Yo, my dad said the song is whatevs, but like he wants to do a docuseries." John Skipper fucking put my father on a plane from South Africa to Los Angeles. We went and had dinner, talked it out, and sure enough, we got to participate in what my father called a righteous heist. In that for 3 weeks, we road tripped through the entirety of the country with a great documentarian by the name of Jonathan Hawk, and told this really cinematic story of a father and son rolling through South Africa and giving context to the country, which for us was really powerful because we'd never gotten to do that before. I'd been there and I'd gone on the road with him a little bit making music, but we never just got to see the country together.
Yeah.
And I was living in the States. And so it ended up being this 9 or 10 part series. The episodes were 5 to 7 minutes, and they played throughout the entirety of the World Cup. And it was incredible to see the way it was received. My dad did end up doing some music. My whole family ended up working for ESPN, helping with infrastructure on the ground because they knew the country. And I stayed on during the actual. So we did that about 8 months before the World Cup, and then during the actual World Cup, I was there for the 6 weeks, doing various human interest stories in and around the Cup.
And did you feel a great affinity with South Africa, Cape Town? Did it connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, as I started going back more and more, I definitely you feel something well up within yourself that you're like, oh, this is where I come from.
Yeah,
you're seeing people who really look like they can be your family.
Yeah,
the first time that I went, I met my grandfather, my cousins, my sister for the first time. So I really came to love going back and being there for long stretches of time. Still to this day, I love it, and I love to see how much it has slowly progressed.
Yeah,
in the wake of the madness.
Yeah,
that was apartheid.
Yep. If you were to reflect on all of your work, is there something that stands out as the high water mark?
I think the Vice World of Sports show. That's my high water mark.
Tell me about it.
That was a docuseries that I did for Vice 2015 to 18. And it was taking a look at people and places in the world strictly through the lens of sports. Mm-hmm. So, you'd never been to a Native Indian reservation before in South Dakota. You've heard all of these statistical stories of what that landscape looks like, but we're going to go there strictly through the lens of high school basketball. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Going to Kenya and being up in the mountains in Eton and learning about the culture of running in Kenya that makes runners great, as opposed to having some sort of physical special attributes.
Yep.
And there were these two twin brothers from New Zealand that had moved there as at 17 years old because they'd gotten smoked by the Kenyans, and they're like, we want to run with them, so we're going to go live there. And so it was like an interesting lens into what this Kenyan cultural fabric was like, and in turn, these guys ran like Kenyans. Mm-hmm. And to be able to go and do these type of stories where people, could get to know a place or even a sport they weren't familiar with, but through the people and the place.
Yep.
Selfishly for me was incredible, like life-changing. Still keep in contact with a bunch of the subjects that I got to know doing those stories. Doing a story on Pop Warner football in outside of Miami, in one of the most challenging social economic neighborhoods in America, where an area that per capita more NFL players come from than even Texas. But what these kids are able to overcome to do so. In you, like, every time you leave there, just being like, wait, I'm in America.
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
those kind of, that was just enriching.
Yeah.
Man. It was just so enriching to be able to be given carte blanche. Here's a budget, go create.
Yep.
And they let us do our thing. And won a Producers Guild Award, nominated for a couple, nominated for Emmys for it. And it was, that's definitely been the high watermark for sure.
I follow you on social media, and I don't know how many years back it was, but I noticed you were continually challenging yourself physically in short little video clips. And then knowing you for many years now, I'm talking to you, but you got deep and you've been deep into physical fitness. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was about I ran the New York Marathon at 39 to raise money for my foundation, Stoked Mentoring. And, someone tells you you can raise money and go run a marathon. You think I'm fit. I ran the marathon, but it almost killed me. And the $80,000 that I raised for the kids didn't make me feel any better. And at that same time, I really felt like I was losing a major step surfing, snowboarding, but surfing especially. Just those little things start to go. Getting to your feet in, critical situations that you didn't even have to think about before. Now you're thinking about.
Yep.
And I was trying to figure out, I've always battled my weight. Weight has always been a challenge. I've always fluctuated somewhere between I could be 200 pounds, I could be 225. And if I'm not watching what that is, then I can get to the 225 side pretty easy. And, that changes everything. Throw on a wetsuit and some booties.
Yeah.
And suddenly, those 34 liters feel like 24.
Yeah.
And so I was looking for something. I was going to a gym, but I just didn't feel like I was learning anything about my body, like how it works. I didn't know how my body worked. So I was frustrated, but I didn't know how it worked.
Yep.
And anyway, I saw some video I read an article in Outside Magazine about this guy who decided to try something called CrossFit. And he hated, he did the article so that he could point out all the flaws and cultiness of it. And then at the end of the article was like, I'm very, very sad to say that this has changed my life in 60 days. So I went home. I remember getting on YouTube and being like, what is this? And I saw these women who were just going to town. And I was like, wait, what? And these are not just young people, but badass athletes. Google, where is this CrossFit thing? Found one in Santa Monica, and that kind of began my journey. I went to a place called CrossFit Santa Monica, and I'd never touched actual barbells before, maybe since high school, and started learning this idea of functional fitness. And I got fucking addicted.
Yeah, I could see it. I was inspired. I was humbled, actually.
I got into it. I got in shape. I got strong. I got mobile and flexible. I started doing all sorts of gymnastic stuff that I didn't know my body was still capable of. Then my friend Logan Gelbrick opened up a gym in Venice called Deuce that sort of shied away from the CrossFit name or culture, but was just sort of a place for all functional fitness. And I started going there in maybe 2013, 2014. And now I got a gym at the house, and I just kind of remain curious as I get older about how to try to squeeze out a few more drops from the lemon.
Yep.
I mean, and now I just like anything that challenges me. Go sit in an ice bath and heat and yoga, whatever it is. I'd really like to try to tap in and feel what it's like to sit in any kind of a little bit of a pain cave.
Yeah.
Whether that's holding that pose in yoga.
Yeah.
And just being like, or, seeing if I can still clean and jerk, 250 pounds.
Yep.
I don't know for how much longer I'll be able to do that.
Right.
But I'm 51 years old now, be 52 in August. And I feel like I'm I have the ability to do things that I didn't think I'd still be able to do today.
Yeah.
With also knowing that, like, you know, you're gonna. I also know the things I can't do anymore,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that.
Yep. But as someone who's surfed, skated, snowboarded for much of your life, and then who sort of came to this CrossFit style, deuce style work that you've done, how was it different to, riding cross waves, skating down the street? Like, what did it do? What was the what did you take from it? What was their takeaway?
Actually knowing what you're recruiting to do something. Like, what part of your body is being recruited to do that turn. Whereas before you're just like, right? Being able to actually feel and understand how those muscles work and look at technique and then apply it accordingly.
Yeah.
Changed everything.
Yeah.
Get down into a bottom turn and just be like, load up and be like, oh, I get to take my time here because I actually have the core strength to get to that place, and it's going to feel really good.
Yep.
I did a lot of work with Brad before he moved to Australia.
Brad Gerlach.
With Brad Gerlach before, in his early days of developing wave key.
Yep.
I started surfing late. I started surfing at 17.
Oh, I didn't know it was that late. Okay.
So, I was constantly, which usually means like you're never going to get it. Those people who start late enough where you're like, oh, you can tell.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't want to be that.
Yep.
So I was always trying to squeeze. I think I got better through my 30s as I gained more technique. And Brad was actually the first person to be like, hey, there's actual technique to the thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Don't just watch me. I'm going to explain to you what is required to do this.
Yep.
Which was kind of weird taboo.
Yeah, it was almost uncool in the culture.
It was uncool. I remember. I remember like Surfer used to do that one page, or sometimes they show some
break
drawing.
It down. Yep.
But other than that, like, no one was really talking about technique.
Yeah.
And Gurr was like, "Come on, guys! Like, what are we doing here?"
Yep.
And I think in the beginning, people thought he was really kooky.
Yeah.
But he's having a last laugh now with Wave Key.
Yeah.
But that really made a difference, and that intersection of like that Wave Key knowledge, but also like applying yourself training wise, made it so that I really do feel like I got better in my 40s for sure.
Yeah.
I think my 40s were like what someone else's 20s would be if they had started surfing around 10. And now I'm not trying to do anything of merit. I'm just trying to have a good time.
Yep.
I got some twin fins in the arsenal now. I even have a single fin.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we started with surfing. When you reflect on surfing, what has it given you in your life? What has it meant to you? What if you were to sort of reflect on surfing in a grand poetic manner? What would you say?
Man, I mean, surfing it's shown me the world. It has really, really shown me the world, and it's given me an incredible international family. I mean, the experiences that I've gotten to have in Mexico, and when the first taking trips and being the guy who's in the back of the pickup but stoked that you got picked to go on the trip, to the first trip that I went on, to like proper trip to the Maldives, getting skunked for 2/3 of it, and it's 110 degrees. But getting that one day that was so perfect that you're like, okay, I got to go back, get back here someday. Or Indo, Mentawais, and Fiji. I mean, I've gotten to surf a lot of the best waves in the world. Jeffreys Bay.
Yeah.
And just to be able to sit in wonder and discovery still.
Yeah.
In the thing.
Yep.
Is it's a gift. I remember one job I had gotten fired from a job, and then on my way home from the job, my car broke down. My piece of shit car had broke down, and I had my surfboard in the back of the car. I didn't know how I was going to pay for any of it. I think that car just got like towed, and I never saw it again. But instead of going home, I walked to the beach, and there was maybe an hour and a half of light left, and there happened to be waves before cell phones. And I remember changing into my trunks, leaving my stuff on the beach, and how it felt when I duck dove through that first whitewater section and came up, and the sun was doing that summer glimmer dance on my face where I had to squint. And the smile that came over me, like that smile that came over me, and paddling out and just sitting there. I don't remember what the waves were like that day, but I will never forget that feeling of peace, of being in my happy place and space where I just get to be.
Yeah.
And that's actually the feeling that I chase now from surfing more than anything else. It's just those moments of presence where you have like a healthy interaction with someone in the water, watching somebody else ride a great wave. You know, now I'm psyched that I got one good wave, as opposed to trying to get the most. And it's given me, I think surfing has given me you talked before about how you sacrifice a lot, right? Or there's this selfishness that sort of takes away from the rest of life. I think what it gave me was the belief that I didn't need to be secure, that I didn't need to be secure and safe on land in order to be happy. In other words, like I didn't have to take a job or pick a path for like structural safety, because none of those things ever overrode being able to continue to chase that possibility. And I think it served me for the most part in my life. And I think really that's the one of the biggest gifts that it's given me.
Nice. Well, Selema, thank you so much. Great chatting as ever.
Thank you, man. Thank you for your patience. This one took a while for us to be able to get together, but I knew it would be worth it, and thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Soundings is produced by me, Jamie Brisick, and Jonathan Shifflett. You can find it on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. Our theme song is Ohana by Farmer Dave and the Wizards of the West. Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal, a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Birdwell, FCS, Patagonia, Rainbow, Vans, Vissla, and Yeti. The Surfer's Journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.